Hello everybody, I am Dr. Bharti. I am working as an assistant professor of law at National Law University, Delhi. Today I will be discussing a module on barriers to access to justice. The objective of this module is to understand various barriers to access to justice, how it adversely affects the access to justice, and how is it adversely affecting the society at large. At last, we will also look into that how we can remove this barrier and secure access to justice to people. In the opening lines of the preamble to the Constitution of India, the sole power has been vested into the hands of we, the people of India, and have guaranteed to ourselves justice, social, economic and political. Justice within its ambit consists of many rights, the denial of which results into the violation of fundamental philosophy of the Constitution, which is to secure the rights to the citizen. Access to justice is therefore a commitment to ensure that the people have a right to have their grievances redressed and a right to pursue their legal remedies, either in court proceeding or other informal proceeding, so as to ensure that their rights are protected. Impediments to access to justice. There are certain impediments to access to justice which, despite of having sufficient legislation for protection of right, debars a person from justice. Impediments to access to justice can broadly be categorized into two categories. Firstly, social and economic barrier, and secondly, legal barriers. To start with, we'll discuss social barriers. What are those social barriers which restrain a person from reaching the court of law and redressing their dispute and availing the justice which is their right? Social barriers are those impediments which arise by virtue of the social setting in which the person resides or has grown up or nurtured in. When the very society in which the person resides becomes the impediment in voicing his opinion, this leads to defeat of justice. India has always been a mix of two societies, India and Bharat. Bharat resides in villages which are heavily dominated by class politics and caste dynamics. Access to basic amenities are the biggest challenge of the days, which in turn resulted from the class divide. The rich grew richer, whereas the poor were oppressed and not given the basic amenities such as proper education, a healthy and balanced diet, as well as a way to enhance their skill so that they could grow as a human potential. It was on account of these systems that a feudalist society came into being. In India, the position of the poor was further marginalized because of the caste system, where they were treated as sevaks. It was by virtue of the social stigma that they were not allowed access to villages. For them, they had separate way to enter the villages and were not allowed to draw the water from the water bodies which were used by the masters. Furthermore, people from the lower caste were not asked to be a part of any religious ceremonies or proceeding and were not invited or given a chance to represent the local bodies. They were denied the right to hold properties and were enslaved into working for their masters. This psychological treatment was internalized by these people for centuries, and the change in rule only meant a set of new master, for everything else was the same. It was on account of all these factors that they were denied the right to access to justice. In the later years, due to the inception of this caste divide, access to justice became all the more difficult. With the advent of colonial rule, separate court of Fort Williams and Calcutta were established. There were separate adjudicatory processes established which governed the indigenous population as well as the British people. For the Dalits, however, no forum of grievance was ever available. Denial of social justice to indigents was one of the reasons for lack of faith in the justice administration system. If an accused was a Dalit, he was forcibly tried, but if he happens to be a complainant, the story was entirely the opposite way. The other reason which were responsible for the complete deterioration of these conditions was Jamindari and Rayatwari system, which compelled the villagers to work on their own lands in the capacity of bonded laborers and were often denied even the basic food for their own subsistence. Multiplicity of taxes depending upon one's caste was another reason why they were heavily indebted and had to rely on the grants of their master and jamindars. Now the next point we need to discuss is What were the steps which were taken by the state to remove these social barriers? We have understood the reason behind the existence of social barriers and how they were affecting the people from reaching the court and in getting the dispute redress and achieving the justice and availing the rights which is granted to them by law. To know how these barriers have been removed and what are the steps taken by the state to remove these barriers, we need to know the following thing. First, post-independence, the system continuously and steadily improved. The series of changes brought by the First Amendment Act delivered the promise which the welfare state held and brought to the farmers the right to hold property and acquire own property. The directive principle of the state policy guaranteed to them the right to equal pay to equal work and commitment to ensure just and human condition of work. Furthermore, by virtue of the mixed legislative enactments along with the judicial activism, new rights were read into the right to life, such as right to earn livelihood and the right to health and well-being, the right to basic standard of living and dignity at workplace, and the right to free medication, which defined the new India. Taking a serious view of the caste divide, the Constitution explicitly forbade the archaic practice of untouchability and made it a criminal offence. By virtue of the social strata that the people came from, early child marriages were rampant and corrupt practices such as dowry and ban on widow remarriages had led to serious deterioration of the society. Measures to curb such social evils were started by joint efforts of Sir Williams, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Swami Vivekanand and Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Furthermore, by virtue of the lack of access to education, the people were not even made aware of their rights that are constitutionally sanctioned to them. It is because of this lack of awareness brought about by dearth of primary education that most of the people are forced to live in the lives of labor and servitude. Most of the worker and their family members are often perturbed by the idea of education, even though it is a fundamental right constitutionally guaranteed under Article 21A of the Constitution. The conventional idea was to send the children to work so that they could earn money and support their family. A most glaring example of the effect of social divide is evidenced in the criminal codes. Safeguarding the protection of interests of people were duly incorporated under the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. It is a fundamental tenet of the criminal law that every man is deemed to be innocent until he has been proved guilty. Provisions such as completion of investigation within sufficient time mentioned in the code itself were made to ensure that the person were not made to undergo the rigors of incarceration over and beyond the requisite period of detention authorized under the law. However, the present population and demographical analysis and under trial prison statistics shows that almost 75% of the under trials are those who belongs to the weaker section of the society and therefore have limited or no access to justice. Moreover, the acute problem of awareness has escalated this ratio to major proposition, which has further eroded the concept of access to justice. After understanding the social barriers, its impact on society and how it is adversely affecting the inter-society, we are moving ahead to know what are the economic barriers which act as a barrier to access to justice, how does they exist in our society and how they stop people from reaching court and getting their dispute redressed. Another very important impediment is the division of society due to economic factors. Access to justice has never been a problem for one who has access to all means and financially sound. Access to justice is a difficulty for someone who has no resource to financial resources and therefore had no resources to pursue legal remedies, assuming that he was in fact unaware about his rights. There were various informal modes of dispute resolution which were and are in existence in the country and have done a phenomenal role in bringing an end to the disputes, thereby bringing justice to the very doorstep of these litigants. Yet by virtue of the prevailing class divide and the all-pervasive domination coupled with the class politics and the blatant misuse of power, the poor are left remediless. Corruption has made the impact of economic barriers more grave. Various public offices work on corruption and bribery, thereby making access to justice a difficult and unachievable reality. Corruption has been internalized at all levels, from getting a copy of judgment to filing of an application or to pray for an adjournment. Corruption therefore is and continues to be one of the gravest hindrances in the administration of justice. Lack of awareness about informal mode of access of justice as well as about the ongoing work of the Legal Service Authorities Act is one of the major reasons that such impediments still exist. Furthermore, the lack of knowledge takes away the right of an indigent to make use of the beneficial provisions. In cases of criminal nature, the complainant or the aggrieved is mostly unrepresented, and his task is limited to that of a spectator after his testimony has been recorded by the court. Due to lack of awareness, indigents rarely file protest applications if the police decide to drop off all the charges against the accused. The lack of knowledge and awareness of the court proceeding as well as general fear of the court system create a gap between the poor and the state enforcement agencies,